images you are seeing came from two different drones from DJI, and well, if I did my job correctly, you shouldn't really notice or be able to tell what camera took which. One of them is the DJI Air 3, which just came out, and the other is the DJI Mavic 3 Classic. And when I was looking at what drones DJI currently offered, I was kind of struggling with deciding which one is the better option. The Mavic series is always kind of known as the, the more prosumer and even professional drone that you can get for the best image quality, the best flying dynamics, the best top speed, whereas the Air series is very much a consumer drone. But the more I use them, they each have their own features that make me want to go back and forth. It makes it a little hard to choose which one is better. And for me, I'm someone who's kind of a camera snob. I want to get the best quality I can get, and certainly the Mavic 3 Classic is giving you that with the larger sensor, which I'll talk about more in a second, but that also comes with a higher price, and you get some pretty cool features with the Air for that lower price. So I wanted to compare these and see which one you should buy if you're kind of in the market for one of these mid-range high-end drones, because either of them are really good options, but they aren't exactly equal. The biggest thing for me, and I say this in all of my videos, is camera quality. That is what matters to me, because for me, drones especially are just flying cameras that let me get images in places that I wouldn't normally be able to. And well, right off the bat, just looking at the cameras on both of these, there is a massive difference. The Mavic 3 Classic has one single camera, and it's a 4/3 sensor. So it's a really big sensor size, especially for a drone, and it can shoot up to 5.1K at 50 frames per second. So it's really high resolution, a really big sensor, and just kind of one of the better flying cameras you can get. Whereas the Air 3 kind of has a little bit of a trick up its sleeve where it has two cameras. They are both 1/1.3-inch sensors, so they're still relatively big for, a camera like this, but one of them is about 24 millimeters and the other is 70 millimeters. So you're getting a 3 times zoom, but it's optical, so you get really high quality with that still. And these can both shoot at up to 4K at 100 frames per second and 4K at 60 frames per second with HDR video. So I mean, from a spec perspective, neither of these cameras are really a slouch at all, but in my mind, you'd kind of think that the bigger sensor would give you like significantly better video quality, right? That's just kind of what you would think. But I wouldn't say that's the case, at least in certain situations or depending on what you're using the camera for. Like if you're planning to upload YouTube videos or anything like that, both of these cameras perform extremely well. And I mean, you can see on the screen from these shots that it really isn't all that different when it comes to sharpness and clarity, even though you're getting more resolution out of the Mavic 3 Classic. And when it comes to color grading, which is where I think you can really, finesse these images to look exactly the way you want. And I do this for every drone video I take, no matter which one I'm using. And with the Air 3, you're getting D-Log-M, which is a log profile. And on the Mavic 3 Classic, you're getting D-Log. So you're getting a flat profile on both. The D-Log of the Mavic 3 Classic, I think, does give you, a noticeably better dynamic range, just depending on the situation. Like if you're facing the sun or anything like that, it does give you a little bit more latitude, and that comes from the sensor as well, of course. But I was surprised at how good the image looked out of the Air 3 in a similar situation. And when you're looking at both of these cameras, I think really the question is, how much do you want a camera that zooms? Now, obviously the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Pro have separate cameras as well that let you zoom in, but those are significantly more expensive. Whereas on the Air 3, you're getting a pretty similar feature, but just at a less price. I loved using this telephoto camera because it just gives you such a different perspective than what you're used to on a drone. And the fact that it's like such good quality, it looks almost identical, at least in my eye, in my use case, as the main sensor does on the Air 3, that I actually want to use this camera instead of just having it be there for, some random situation. This is kind of the main camera I use when I'm flying the DJI Air 3. And that's why for me, if I'm going out on a trip and I just have to take one drone, I'm probably going to pick up the Air 3. Even though I do think the image quality out of the Mavic 3 Classic does look slightly better, I'm more concerned with being able to get the shot, and having that telephoto zoom lens just gives you more options, and they both look really good. So for me, I'd actually choose the camera on the technically lesser drone of the Air 3 because it really is that flexible and it just looks that good. Now, camera aside, the rest of the specs on these drones are actually pretty similar. I mean, size, the Air 3 is slightly smaller, but not so much smaller. It doesn't feel like a mini series, but it is smaller than the Mavic. So if you're traveling a lot, that is something to definitely keep in mind. The batteries are physically smaller, so you could take more with you. The propellers and everything, you could take more with you. Just, have smaller size, you can pack more, or just, easily fit in smaller places. But that's not to say the Mavic 3 Classic isn't portable. I still take it with me all the time. But, depending on how you are traveling with it, like if you have it in your backpack, all those ounces matter. So, having something smaller does come in handy. But even though it is smaller, you're getting a lot of the same features. So both have omnidirectional sensing for, when you're flying. So hopefully you don't ever crash a drone. I haven't crashed one yet with all these sensors. So hopefully that doesn't happen. They both have excellent video transmission and signals. So when you're flying it, it's a strong signal. You can see the image really well. Although the Air 3 does have the next generation, has 04 video transmission. So you can actually go up to 20 kilometers, line of sight. Whereas the Mavic 3 Classic only has 15 kilometers. Not a huge difference there. I don't really know who's flying that far, but hey, if you wanted to, you can. But the thing that I was surprised about was the battery life, and they are rated at the same for both of these, 46 minutes on a battery. And well, that is a long time. And of course, depending on how you fly, you're never really going to get that much battery life. That's like perfect scenario. You can realistically expect something like 35 minutes. And I think that's a pretty decent amount of time when you're in the air. And that's great because I remember the days of having to, throw the drone up, get the shots you need, bring it down because the battery life just wasn't very long at all. And that's not really the case now. You can put the drone up, explore, and get the shots you want and just kind of think about it while the drone is in the air instead of having to rush everything. And that's something you can do with both of these, which is really great. But I will say there is one thing that when flying the drone, and it's something you can't really show on video, and it's just the way the drones feel. And the Mavic certainly feels more sporty and more aggressive. Maybe that's not the right word, but it just feels much more responsive than the Air does. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm feeling with this flying, what the different characteristics are, because if you're looking at the specs, well, they both are rated at the same speed of around 47 miles per hour, which is super fast. But interestingly, the ascent and descent speed of the Air 3 is actually better than the Mavic Classic 3. It can go at 10 meters per second there, whereas the 3 Classic can only go at 6 or 8 meters per second respectively. So technically, I mean, the Air 3 should feel a little bit more sporty and controlled, but when I fly both of them, I just don't quite get that feeling with the Air 3. The Mavic 3 Classic just feels more controlled and easier to fly. Now, I'm fully willing to admit that that's just my perception and it's not actually true, but I'm just letting you know what I have experienced when flying both of these drones. For instance, with these shots of the horses, obviously I wanted to be sensitive of the animals. I don't want to get close or anything like that. So I wanted to make sure I have the best control possible. And when I needed to make, quick adjustments, fine tuning, it just felt like it was a little sluggish, like it would kind of, ramp to get there instead of just doing it. Whereas on the Mavic 3 Classic, that wasn't the case. Like you kind of just make a control change and it does it. I don't know. That's just something I noticed with these drones. Does that mean that the Air 3 flies poorly? No, absolutely not. It flies really well. It's just when you're comparing both of them, I do think there is a noticeable difference. So when it comes to those types of features, the connection quality and the flying characteristics, there is a slight difference there. But when it comes to the connection quality, I don't think you're really going to be getting that much of a benefit from the 04 transmission compared to the 03 Plus of the Mavic 3 Classic. And I think the Mavic flies slightly better than the Air, but it's kind of give and take. They kind of equal out and they both perform really well. And when it comes to that, honestly, they're pretty equal. So if you're in the market for one of these mid-range drones, the decision of which one to get is not as easy as you might initially think. I mean, I think most people would assume that you just choose the Mavic because this is going to give you the best of the best, for that level of drone. And while that is still an excellent drone, I'm glad it exists and I still take it with me almost everywhere when I'm going to be filming. It's hard to say that that is worth the extra around $500 for the equivalent package. The Air 3 is offering a ton of cool camera features that you just can't get on the other drone, or at least not for the same price. And when the image quality looks as close as it does and the flying capabilities are as close as they are, I think saving the money and going for the, I guess, technically lesser drone, even though it's not really, but the lower end, more consumer drone, the Air 3, is probably the way to go. And that's something I didn't really expect because, like I said up front, for me, I'm really all about having the best quality possible. But when you see the features the Air 3 has and how good the image quality looks, it's hard to pass it up.